Okay, we'll kick off. I suppose this morning's topic can be quite subjective, and it depends on what perspective you're coming here from, what type of stakeholder you are. So whether you're a project manager, an engineer, developer, local authority, you may have a different view on some of the points that we put up here today. But I suppose the point of the talk is to come from a client project management perspective. So we will quickly move on. Just very briefly about my background. As Greg said, I'm an associate director in Lafferty Project Management. I have a reasonably diverse background in terms of engineering, construction experience, and also experience in the telecommunications sector, both in Ireland and in the Middle East in recent times. Okay, very briefly about Lafferty. We are project managers and architects. We were established back in 1997. We work across a number of sectors: commercial, residential, mixed use. We're probably very well known for Dundrum Shopping Centre project, Grand Canal Theatre, amongst others. And also in recent times, part of our overall business strategy is to adopt a strategy of diversification into other sectors. And we've had recent wins in the life sciences and hotel sector. And we have relatively strong alliances in the data centre sector as well. So moving into the lecture proper. So as Greg has said, it's successful projects from a project manager's perspective. So just very briefly, an image about Einstein. I'm not too sure who the guy on the left is, but part of the reason for putting the slide up there is really about preparation and defining projects and defining the problem at hand. As Einstein said, if he had an hour to save the world, he would spend 50 minutes defining the issue and then coming up with the solution. So this is a concept and a philosophy that we've adopted in Lafferty to try and fully talk through the issue and the project at hand with clients to fully understand what are their expectations before we actually proceed into the project proper. So really what we're trying to say here is it's all about upfront preparation and defining the problem at hand. Okay, as I've touched on there briefly, I won't dwell on this too long. Some of the projects that Lafferty have undertaken, and also some of the successful projects that Lafferty and both myself, prior to working in Lafferty, have undertaken. And we've just put some images up there of the Oval development in Shelburne Road, just around the corner. We have Dundrum Shopping Centre, and we also have Grand Canal Theatre. In my own opinion, they're successful projects for different reasons. Some of the projects were completed on time, to cost and to programme, and some of them would have been maybe just too on time and programme, and they may have had potentially some cost issues. So the point is that there's trade-offs in terms of an understanding of what a successful project is, and again, depending on what perspective, from a stakeholder's perspective, you are coming from as well. Okay, we just put up some definitions here just by way of contrast in terms of what some of the professional societies and associations would deem to be a successful project. So we have a definition there from the PMBOK. So PMBOK says that client expectations should be met in terms of time, cost and specification to achieve the concept of a successful project. The PMI say that success and failure is basically a matter of stakeholder appreciation. Deloitte in the UK, who I did some work with a number of years ago, their view on a successful project is that once financial gain is achieved, in their view, it is a successful project. And I suppose the last quote there is probably very apt, and from my own perspective, really achieving customer or client satisfaction and achieving their expectations, that's probably the holy grail for a successful project. But it's trying to understand, have you actually achieved that? And I would say in some instances, it's quite hard at the end of a project to understand, have you actually achieved full client expectations, and have you fully satisfied what they have requested of you? We've included a quote there at the bottom of this slide, and this is specifically in relation to a project that Lafferty completed with Workday recently. And the reason I've included this is a testimonial from a client, which includes some very important points in terms of the way that Lafferty complete projects. And if we just dwell on some of the points there that we've highlighted, that we take full ownership for projects. We have delivered on a very challenging set of client objectives. We have understood and defined the project brief with the client at the outset. We have put in place a very strong project structure, again at the project outset. Communication and effective communication is key to a successful project, and full accountability for the project as client project managers. And again, as we go through this presentation, you will see that some of these words back from one of our very respected clients are also linked to the Lafferty core values, which are also linked to the critical success factors for a successful project. Okay, just moving on, some key factors as we see for successful projects, and these are also some of the core values which we hold in Lafferty Project Management and Lafferty Architecture. So innovation and creativity, and the philosophy of added value, commitment to deliver a project from cradle to grave, integrity and trust we hold very highly within our organisation, trust and achieving the trust of the client, teamwork, which is very, very important, and communication, both listening and learning. Okay. So, just moving into, I suppose, the main body of the presentation, this slide will present what we see as the critical success factors for successful projects. First up is effective management of health and safety. It probably goes without saying that it's incumbent on us all as professionals to have a full appreciation and consideration for health and safety management on sites. We may not be directly responsible for it, we may not be the PSDP, we may not be the PSCS, but as professionals, whether we're on site or whether we're in a design team meeting, we should have a full appreciation and we should have some level of role in effective health and safety. In Lafferty, on all our agendas, in all our meetings, health and safety is the first item on the agenda, and that's how highly we hold this critical success factor. Implementing a highly experienced team with capacity. So as project managers, a lot of the time, not all of the time, we are brought in at the very outset of the project to assist the client in appointing consultants, appointing the design team, and we like to feel that we have the experience and expertise in the market to inform and advise the client in terms of what type of design team that they require for the project at hand. It's not always the same type of consultant that was required, so it's very important to get the right team if you can at the outset. That's not always possible. Sometimes as project managers we're brought in later in the project timeline, and we may not be able to fully influence the design team or the consultants at the table. I suppose the last point there on that is capacity. It's stating the obvious, but the market at the moment is it's very heated for consultants, for contractors, for subcontractors, for specialists. So it's very important at the moment where we're involved in projects and advising clients that we do analyse the proposed design team at hand and whether they actually have the capacity to deliver on the project. That's very important. Okay, next up, a clear understanding of the common goals. And this probably goes back to the Einstein slide in terms of spending the time at the project outset to actually define the project and the problem at hand with the client. In our own experience, if there's not a clear understanding between the project manager and the client and then the design team of the common goals of the project, whether it's to achieve, the most sustainable commercial office development in Dublin, or whether it's to achieve a project with 0% lost time incidents, whatever the project objectives are, they need to be clearly communicated by the client to the project manager, and then it's incumbent really on the project manager to make sure that everybody else as part of the team is aware of the common project goals, because if that's vague at the outset, it's very hard, we find, to recover from that as the project proceeds, because the project objectives are not as clear as they could be. So we will place a lot of emphasis on that factor. Clearly defined project structure, roles and responsibilities. Again, a very important point that if the project structure is not clearly defined and appropriate to the project at hand from the project outset, there will be problems down the line. And that goes for the client organisation, the design team setup, the project management setup. The roles and responsibilities of each key stakeholder to the project should be clearly identified at the project outset, because again, vagueness and ambiguity is not helpful to projects, and as we're probably all aware, most projects at the moment are very fast track, reasonably aggressive, very challenging. So there needs to be a clear structure at the outset of who's doing what in very basic English. So we place a lot of emphasis on that point. Agree relevant procurement mechanisms. Again, somewhat related to the market at the moment. There seems to be there is a real interest in management contracting, for example, as a procurement mechanism to get to site quicker than traditional procurement. However, that's not always appropriate for all clients. So we would spend a lot of time with clients agreeing and discussing the pros and cons of each procurement method and each procurement mechanism available to the client for the project at hand. And again, it's very important that you make the right decision at the right time in terms of procurement, whether it's design and build, traditional management contracting. But again, you should spend time on this to get it agreed with the client and with all the key stakeholders. Good teamwork and a positive can-do attitude. Again, it probably seems a very obvious critical success factor, but in terms of good teamwork is very important, certainly from a client project management perspective, that everyone on the team, as best as they can, should adopt a can-do attitude. This is probably even a more challenging requirement at the moment with how busy we all are. The market is very busy. We all have numerous commissions on projects, but if in some way the project manager can engender a can-do and positive attitude within the team, that will assist everybody towards a completion of the project, hopefully on time, and hopefully on time and to cost and quality, if at all possible. Clear lines of communication. If I had to pick out one key factor, I would probably say communication is the key critical success factor for a successful project. That goes for communications within the client body. It goes for communications from the project manager to the client, and from the project manager to the design team and any other specialist consultants appointed. Poor communication is a real problem. And I think it's also incumbent on the client project manager to sometimes push clients into uncomfortable spaces in terms of communications if there are issues, because if there's communication or miscommunication from the client to the project manager, that will only get worse as it feeds down the line to everybody else. So, as I say, if I had to dwell on one point, effective communications and efficient communications, whether it's verbal communication, whether it's reporting, whether it is the establishment of governance and meeting minutes around projects, it's critical. Okay, I better move on, I'm under time pressure here. The client brief and effective decision making by the client. This goes back to the outset that you need to define the problem early with your client, and this again is somewhat related to the Einstein slide. Effective change management. Change is always going to be on projects, so as a project manager you need to put in place effective change management procedures and define what change is at the start to assist your project towards its success. Document management system, again I'm not going to dwell on that point. Ownership, responsibility and accountability, again I think I've gone through that in terms of the client project manager's key requirements on a project. Problem solving and proactive problem solving, not reactive problem solving, is a key point. Top management support, you need buy-in from the client for all the project constraints and the project objectives from the outset. Without that, you're doomed to failure. And you need to agree the success criteria and KPIs with all stakeholders as best you can at the project outset. I just included some quotes there and some considerations on this topic. I suppose if I had to dwell on one point here, this is a subjective phenomenon. Depending on what type of stakeholder you are, you will have a different perspective on what we've gone through today, and ultimately it's about stakeholder satisfaction. If you can measure that, gauge that and achieve that, hopefully you've achieved a successful project. That's it. Thank you.